Result is women are better negotiators, but not for themselves. And I think if you translate it into sort of energy that people have, I think people with a lot of, let's say, feminine energy are better negotiators than typical masculine or a male energy. I don't know how to translate that well, but so basically if you have a lot of empathy, if you have good listening skills, if you have a lot of creativity in you, all those kind of things are really helpful if you negotiate the way we all negotiate, which is not an arm wrestling match. You make it into an arm wrestling match, my gain is your loss. Yeah, of course, then probably men are classically better at it because ultimately we start to fight, and fighting is more the masculine trait, of course. But what I see is the creativity part to me, and the really understanding part is really, I think that is the part where what we can learn.
What do we as three white men, all middle-aged, what do we need to be learning from our women counterparts and partners?
What can we as men all learn from the women? No, I think, well, first of all, it's a Harvard study. It's not me. I'm just reproducing basically what they found, but we use it a lot here in the Netherlands. And the full result is women are better negotiators, but not for themselves. And I think if you translate it into sort of energy that people have, I think people with a lot of, let's say, feminine energy are better negotiators than typical masculine or a male energy. I don't know how to translate that well, but so basically if you have a lot of empathy, if you have good listening skills, if you have a lot of creativity in you, all those kind of things are really helpful if you negotiate the way we all negotiate, which is not an arm wrestling match. You make it into an arm wrestling match, my gain is your loss. Yeah, of course, then probably men are classically better at it because ultimately we start to fight, and fighting is more the masculine trait, of course. But what I see is the creativity part to me, and the really understanding part is really on your question, what can we learn? I think that is a part where what we can learn, but also sometimes the courage part, it displays a little bit different maybe every now and again, but the courageous part is also a key thing I think any negotiator should adapt. And of course, making yourself smaller and saying, I don't deserve this, or the other party will probably do this, this, and this. That I think is a downside of the feminine traits in negotiation, and that's I think what explains the comma in the line, better negotiators, comma, not just for themselves. Because if you go to the table and basically say, you know, what I'm going to ask, I don't deserve this, or what I'm going to ask, maybe other people are better. Sort of the insecurity isn't helpful to anyone, right? So I think that part is the part where we really put a lot of. I don't think it's nature, to be honest. I think it's nurture in a lot of systems. At least in Dutch society, we're very, everybody talks about how progressive we are. I think we're really traditional here. We bring up our girls, we bring them up differently than our boys. And, you know, if you're a boy and you're a little bit, you have a big mouth, it's seen, oh, wow, look at him. He's a good kid. If girls do that, we appreciate that differently. And I think it starts there and it goes all the way up until, you know, not me, but if I as a father, I don't know, I see an ambulance, I tell my son, hey son, look, an ambulance. And if I don't grab my daughter and say, hey girl, look at that, it's an ambulance, right? So it's also the choices you make as fathers and as mothers, but also the choices you make in the school system, all the way up until the first jobs and the first contracts they're going to negotiate. And this is where, to me, the interesting difference comes in, because if they start to negotiate contracts on behalf of someone else, wow, I mean, that's a different story, right? So we always tell the people basically, we shouldn't fix the women in this part, but it really helps if you externalize yourself. So you have yourself and then negotiating yourself. If you negotiate, there's a few tips we can give you, but they're basically good for everybody. But we really want to talk to the organizations and the men involved, because everybody has to negotiate in a culture. And if the culture that you're negotiating in is not fit for women or not made for women, then as an organization, you should maybe think about flipping that, and what role can men play in that. I always end up with a sort of a joke at the end, because it's interesting to see that most HR departments here in the Netherlands, the big majority is women who negotiate with the new men and women that want to join the firm. Okay, so the rest of the joke I won't make, but it's really key that you see it's a systemic thing, right? It's the organization that chooses to reward certain negotiation behavior, right, and what they don't reward. And to me, that's a really the illustration of women of the HR department negotiating with new women is a weird one, right? So here they're really good in negotiating because they can externalize themselves. It's not for them, but here it's difficult. So there, to me, lies a bit of maybe the key to unlocking more value there.
Yeah, it's a deep answer there in terms of societal and then organizational and then personal dynamics occurring.
Yep. Yeah, and I like it. This is also what we try to help people with. And even though I agree with you shouldn't fix the women, you should fix the system. What we try to do is we look at the three, so the man, the organization, and the women. And with those three, we can try to, close gender pay gaps or visibility gaps or whatever. But I do tell people, well, I don't agree with don't fix the system as a dynamics for not doing anything.
Right.
I have never seen the system change by me sitting on a couch waiting like this for the system to change. So you should at least do something. This is my and a lot of the people that work here, our let's say thing that we can do to change the system, and maybe it's not the right one. Let's talk about it, let's disagree, and let's find a better way. But not doing anything and saying, well, I shouldn't fix the women, fix the system, and then sit on your couch and do nothing, to me is a bit of a comfortable way of not doing them.
So having worked both in the public sector and private sector, I'm sure you've seen your fair share of dirty tricks and hard bargains. How do you handle counterparts that are disrupting the negotiation through less than savory tactics?
I think it depends on the tricks. If they're small tricks, let's say, we tell people when we train people, we tell people we're not training you on dirty tricks, but we show them to you because we want you to recognize them. And here's what you can do against them. So if it's that, let's say the tricks at the table, they're so easy to counter. We always tell people it's skilled negotiator. Don't even try with skilled negotiators because it'll only lead to irritation. Is that a good English word? Annoyance in the relation. So don't even try it. It's a waste of time. And then there's two other categories of tricks, I think. One is where you use tricks to manipulate and in a fair way. I mean, I can manipulate a lot with when we talk about stuff. When do I come back to you? Taking a lot of time, for example, those kind of tricks. Sometimes they're justified, but the first time I always do is a deadline check, right? You give me a deadline and I always say, oh, that's hard, Nolan, because I still have to talk to Aram and I only see him next week on Thursday. So I can't, I can't work with your deadline of Monday. And if you then say, oh, well, okay, fine, talk to Aram first. Well, then I know your deadline was fake, right? So it's these little tricks at the table. I always say, see if they are justified, because it can be a deadline that you have to work with. But if they're not, then at least take all the, there's some smart tricks with which you can challenge those kind of dynamics or deadlines. So that's one. And then the other is, of course, the big tricks but that's sometimes because we are part of big public negotiations or negotiations where journalists really want to know, what's going on there. Yeah, if you then use media, for example, or all kind of ways to put pressure, or you get, parliamentarians or ministers or high-ranking civil servants all of a sudden picking up the phone, putting a lot of pressure on the other side. Yeah, those are, of course, tricks that are really harmful for the relation, but sometimes can flip the table immediately, and all of a sudden you're in a losing streak. Well, I tell people there's one thing you have as a negotiator, which is your image, your reliability. You don't want to play around with that too often because people will hold it against you for a long time. And if you're, especially like us as professional negotiators, if you negotiate once at this table and the next time you run into the same, and this is a small country, if you run into the same people again, or people do their research on you and like, oh, that's the guy that pulled the trick in the other negotiation. Yeah, that's a trust issue. So and we also, again, here the answer to me is also relation. Really making sure that through the relation, and even I did a few big negotiations. One was with the Mexican government, and it was stone cold in the beginning, and they were virtual negotiations. So the first thing I did was really work on the relation and sort of getting the temperature above what is it?
Freezing.
32 Fahrenheit. We call it 0 here, but getting the temperature back to normal. And with that, building a relation and finding that unity that Cialdini always talks about. So how can we solve this problem together? Took us months. And then the deal phase went quite quickly, ultimately, because we had a good relation. But also make sure you don't jump in, find something common to work on, show interest in the other person. And it ultimately resulted 2 years later, one of the parts of the deal that we had to travel up and down to look at implementation. And during the first trip, I shook hands with this person that didn't come across as very friendly in the beginning. So we had a whole joint program, and it was also to make sure that we would keep this warm relation because we needed each other for the implementation. But the second evening, I ate something bad or touched something bad. I had a bad night, let's say. And the next morning, this person, he said, you know what, let me stop by a pharmacy. He got me medication. He got me the special water you guys have there. If you, we made pictures of us standing together on a village square. It was hilarious. So that story, I always try to say, if I just started to negotiate with that person without first de-icing, let's say, the relation, we would have got I was probably still negotiating with them. Yeah, to me, that's still, that picture of us standing together is still, well, I keep it to myself, but it's still a very nice picture. Yeah.